"Hands behind your head," the cop barked, and my own brother nodded. Christmas Eve snow hissed under Dad's stolen Mustang. Mark flashed a forged restraining order. He'd called police on me seconds after Lily's crayon note begged me to dial 911. Accounts emptied, keys seized. The shop we built was slipping away before the carols finished. But Mark missed one thing. That same 7-year-old hid her tablet recording his next words. "Torch it tomorrow. Blame Ethan's temper." He thought I'd shatter. Instead, I loaded digital dynamite. The fuse was already lit. My name is Ethan Cole Garrett, and I'm 40 years old. I spend my days restoring classic American muscle cars at Heritage Rides, the shop my brother Mark and I built after Dad passed. The scent of chrome polish and warm engine oil fills our Ohio warehouse, while December snow taps gently against the roof tin. My niece Lily, Mark's 7-year-old daughter, giggles by the workbench, drawing cars with crayons that match the Christmas lights strung across our office. Mark, my younger brother by 2 years, cracks another casino joke. But the stress lines around his eyes betray his growing gambling problem. I keep a separate ledger locked in Dad's old toolbox. Every transaction, every client payment, meticulously recorded. Insurance, I tell myself. Though I pray, I'll never need it. Across the room, Christmas bulbs cast colored light everywhere, except the corner where Mark stands whispering into his phone. Silent cracks, split steel hearts. But let me start from the beginning. Christmas Eve dinner had been a tense affair. Mark kept checking his phone under the table while his wife, Rachel, talked too loud about their plans for a second home in Florida. Dad would have hated the showboating. He always said a man who brags about money usually doesn't have any. I nursed my eggnog, mostly to have something to do with my hands. The carved turkey sat half-eaten between us, swimming in congealing gravy. Lily picked at her mashed potatoes, eyes darting between her parents and me. "So, Ethan," Rachel said, refilling her wine glass for the 4th time. "Mark mentioned some paperwork you two need to go over tonight. End-of-year stuff?" I frowned. "First I'm hearing of it." Mark cleared his throat. "Just some formalities. Dad's old Mustang title transfer, shop insurance renewal, nothing that can't wait till after dessert." Something in his tone made my shoulders tighten. That Mustang was Dad's pride, a '67 fastback he'd restored himself after coming home from Vietnam. Mark knew damn well we'd agreed it would stay in the shop as our showcase piece. "Uncle Ethan, can I show you my new tablet after dinner?" Lily's small voice cut through the tension. "Sure thing, kiddo." I winked at her, grateful for the interruption. When Rachel brought out the apple pie, I excused myself to grab my jacket from the hall closet. As I slipped it on, I felt something stiff in the inner pocket, something that hadn't been there when I arrived. "Just stepping out for some air," I called, heading for the front door before anyone could object. The December night hit me like a slap. 20 degrees, maybe less, with fat snowflakes swirling under the porch light. I dug into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of construction paper, bright green, Lily's favorite color. My fingers trembled slightly as I unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakably Lily's, large, wobbly letters in purple crayon. "Uncle Ethan Daddy says sign tonight or you lose it all. Call 911. My stomach dropped through the porch boards. The childish misspelling of sign made the message all the more chilling. What the hell was Mark planning? And how bad was it that his own daughter felt the need to warn me? I pulled out my phone, snowflakes landing and melting on the screen as I dialed 911. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I could barely hear the ring. 911, what's your emergency?" The operator's calm voice felt surreal against the chaos in my head. "I'm at 1423 Oakwood Drive," I said, keeping my voice low. "I believe I'm being set up for something. My niece just passed me a note warning me that her father is trying to force me to sign something that would make me lose it all. We're business partners. I need an officer here." "Sir, are you in immediate danger?" I glanced at the warm glow from the dining room windows. "I don't think so, but is there a weapon involved?" "No, but this isn't right. Something's happening." "Okay, sir. Officers are being dispatched to your location. Please stay on the line." In the distance, I heard sirens. They were coming fast, too fast, almost as if... Did someone else from this address call before me? I asked. The operator paused. I can't disclose that information, sir. Please remain where you are. The sirens grew louder, and my mouth went dry. Had Mark already called them? Was I walking into something worse than I realized? Snowflakes stung my cheeks as I paced the length of the porch. The Christmas wreath on the door seemed to mock the holiday spirit with its cheerful red bow. Through the window, I could see Mark speaking intensely to Rachel, who nodded and pulled Lily closer to her side. The sirens were just blocks away now. I thumbed the note in my hand, the waxy crayon catching on my calloused fingertips. 20 years of building heritage rides together, and now this. What could Mark possibly gain by forcing me out? The porch light flickered, casting harsh amber shadows that stretched and contracted across the snow-covered lawn. For a second, I was transported back to the shop, Dad teaching us both how to weld, warning us that light could trick the eye if you weren't careful. Always verify what you think you see, boys, he'd said, especially when something valuable is on the line. The police cruiser turned onto our street, light bar painting the snowbanks in alternating blue and red. I took a deep breath of frigid air, steadying myself. Footsteps crunched in the snow behind the house, then around the side, someone coming from the back door. The front door opened at the same moment, spilling warm light onto the porch. Ethan? What are you doing out here in the cold? Mark stood in the doorway, his face a mask of concern that didn't reach his eyes. I didn't have time to answer Mark before the police cruiser screeched to a halt at the curb. The red and blue strobes sliced through the falling snow, painting grotesque shadows across the Christmas lights strung along the porch railing. 2 officers stepped out, hands resting casually near their holsters. "Evening, gentlemen," the taller one called out, trudging through the ankle-deep snow. His partner flanked him, eyes scanning the scene with practiced detachment. Mark brushed past me, practically jogging down the porch steps. "Officers, thank God you're here." His voice cracked with what sounded like relief. To anyone who didn't know him, it would have seemed genuine. "You called this in?" the first officer asked. "Yes, sir. I'm Mark Garrett." He glanced back at me, eyes flashing with something cold before turning back to the police. "That's my brother, Ethan." The second officer looked at me. "And you also called 911, sir?" "I did," I said, stepping forward. "My niece passed me a note saying, 'He's been making threats all evening,'" Mark cut in, reaching into his jacket. "I hate to do this, but I've got a restraining order. Just filed it yesterday." My jaw dropped as he pulled out an official-looking document and handed it to the officer. "That's impossible," I stammered. "There's been no hearing. No, it's an emergency ex parte order," the officer said, scanning the paper. "Says here you threatened Mr. Garrett with a tire iron at your shared business premises yesterday." "That's absurd." The cold air burned my lungs as I raised my voice. "We had a disagreement about year-end bonuses, but there was no tire iron. This is completely fabricated." Mark shook his head sadly. "See what I'm dealing with? He gets like this when he drinks. The stress of the holidays, our fathers passing a few years back. It's been building." "I haven't had a drop," I protested, the absurdity of the situation making my head spin. "Officer, this is a setup. My niece warned me that he was planning something." The first officer looked between us, clearly trying to sort fact from fiction. "Sir, is there a child involved here?" "My daughter," Mark said quickly. "She's 7. She's inside with my wife. Ethan's been filling her head with stories, trying to turn her against me." I clenched my fists, the accusation hitting like a sucker punch. Behind Mark, the front door opened again, and Rachel appeared, Lily partially hidden behind her. "Is everything okay?" Rachel called, her voice quavering perfectly. "Just stay inside with Lily, honey," Mark called back, his cologne, that expensive sandalwood stuff he'd started wearing lately, drifting over on the breeze, mingling with the scent of his victory. I caught a glimpse of Lily's face peering from behind the living room banister, her eyes wide with confusion. She hadn't expected this. Neither had I. "Look," the second officer said, tucking the restraining order into his pocket. "We'll need to verify this document, but in the meantime, it appears valid. Mr. Garrett, Ethan, You'll need to maintain a distance of at least 500 feet from your brother and the business premises until this is sorted out. That's our family business, I said, desperation creeping into my voice. Our father built it. We're equal partners. The business ownership isn't our jurisdiction, the first officer replied. That's a civil matter, but the restraining order is something we have to enforce. Mark reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. I recorded the incident yesterday. Would that help clarify things? He held it up, thumb hovering over the play button. My stomach lurched. Whatever he had on there was fabricated, but in that moment, I knew arguing would only make me look worse. Officer, I said, trying to keep my voice level, check the filing time on that restraining order. I bet it was processed just hours ago, right after business hours on Christmas Eve when no one could verify it. The officer frowned slightly, but shook his head. Like I said, we'll verify it. But for now, we need to ensure immediate safety. Do you have keys to the business premises? Yes, I admitted, my heart sinking. I'll need you to surrender those temporarily. The second officer held out his hand, and I felt the world tilt sideways. Those keys represented everything. 20 years of sweat equity, our father's legacy, my livelihood. With numb fingers, I dug into my pocket and pulled out my keyring. The shop keys glinted in the pulsing police lights as I separated them from my house and car keys. The cold metal left my palm, and with it went any control I had over the situation. This is wrong, I said quietly, more to myself than anyone else. Mark's face was a portrait of false concern, but his eyes gleamed with triumph. It's just temporary, Ethan, until you get help. That's when I noticed it, or rather, noticed what wasn't there. Dad's prized '67 Mustang, the midnight blue fastback we'd restored together as teenagers, was missing from the driveway where I'd seen it parked earlier. Where's Dad's car? I asked, my voice hollow. Mark shrugged. Safe. Don't worry about it. The officer handed the keys to Mark. Mr. Garrett, we'd advise you to change the locks as soon as possible, given the circumstances. Already called a locksmith, Mark replied smoothly. He's meeting me at the shop in an hour. Outside on the street, another engine revved, the distinctive rumble of a classic V8. I turned to see the Mustang's taillights glowing red in the distance, idling at the corner. One of Mark's poker buddies must have been waiting to drive it away. Sir, the first officer said to me, I'd suggest you find somewhere else to stay tonight. If you return to the business or approach your brother before this is resolved, you will be arrested. The Mustang's engine growled louder, then faded as it pulled away, its taillights bleeding into the night like my vanishing leverage. The Mustang's engine roared in the distance, that distinctive rumble Dad had fine-tuned himself. My feet moved before my brain caught up. I lurched forward, stumbling down the walkway toward the street. The snow crunched under my dress shoes as I broke into a run. Hey! Stop right there! One of the officers moved to block my path, his hand instinctively shifting toward his belt. I tried to sidestep him. That's my father's car. He can't just... The second officer stepped in front of me, creating a human barrier. Sir, stand down, now. Through gaps between their shoulders, I caught the Mustang's taillights rounding the corner, Mark behind the wheel. The tires spat slush and snow into the air as he gunned it, the back end fishtailing slightly before straightening out. The midnight blue paint disappeared into the darkness, leaving only those red taillights like eyes watching me, mocking me. That's theft, I said, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. That's Grand Theft Auto. My name's on that title too. The first officer shook his head. Look, Mr. Garrett, vehicle ownership is another civil matter. If you have documentation proving sole ownership, you can file a report. Otherwise, as co-owners of the business, he's stealing everything, I interrupted, desperation making my voice crack. Don't you see what's happening here? Snow began falling harder, fat flakes catching in my eyelashes. The muffled quiet of a snow-covered Christmas Eve settled around us, broken only by the fading growl of Dad's Mustang as Mark took it God knows where. The officer's face hardened. Sir, I need to be absolutely clear. You are not to set foot inside Heritage Rides before your court date on Monday. Not the parking lot, not the property line. If you do, You will be arrested for violating the restraining order. Do you understand? His words landed like body blows. Monday, 3 days away. 3 days for Mark to do whatever he wanted with our business, with Dad's legacy. 3 days to empty accounts, steal inventory, forge documents. I understand, I said, though I didn't. Not really. How could I understand any of this? The officer continued, his tone flat and professional. I suggest you find somewhere else to stay tonight. A friend's place, maybe a hotel. I nodded mechanically, looking past them toward the corner where the Mustang had disappeared. The Christmas lights from neighboring houses blurred through my unfocused eyes, smearing into streaks of color against the darkness. The cold was seeping through my thin dress shoes now, my toes going numb. Funny how you notice these small discomforts even when your world is collapsing. We're done here, the first officer said to his partner. They backed away slowly, watching me as if I might suddenly bolt or do something crazy. I just stood there, hands hanging uselessly at my sides. What could I do? Chase after a car on foot? Fight the police? Neither option would get me anywhere except a jail cell. The officers retreated to their cruiser, keeping an eye on me the whole time. One of them spoke briefly into his radio before they both climbed in. The doors slammed shut with a heavy finality that seemed to punctuate the end of any discussion. As their engine started up, I felt the first real wave of panic rising. Where would I go? What would I do? How deep did Mark's scheme run? If he'd planned this so meticulously, restraining order on Christmas Eve, the Mustang already positioned for a quick getaway. What else had he arranged? Bank accounts, insurance policies, supplier contracts. The cruiser pulled away, leaving me alone on the snow-covered walkway. The house behind me wasn't mine. It was Rachel's parents' place where we'd gathered for Christmas Eve dinner. I couldn't go back inside now, not with Mark's wife and her parents undoubtedly backing his story. The night exhaled an ominous silence, broken only by the distant sounds of holiday celebrations in other homes. Laughter. Music, the normal rhythm of Christmas Eve that suddenly seemed to belong to a different universe than the one I was trapped in. I stood there, watching my breath cloud in front of my face, those twin red embers of the Mustang's taillights still burning in my vision like an afterimage. Dad had loved that car. We'd restored it together when I was 16, Mark 13. Dad's hands guiding mine on the socket wrench, teaching me patience, teaching me to do things right the first time, and now Mark had it, along with everything else. I stumbled to my pickup, fingers numb as I fumbled with the keys. The engine groaned to life, heater blasting cold air before slowly warming. Sitting there, I watched the house where my niece was probably wondering what had happened to her uncle, where Mark's wife was probably smiling, where everything had just fallen apart. I pulled away from the curb without knowing where to go. Home felt wrong. Too empty, too close to the shop Mark had stolen. A hotel seemed pathetic on Christmas Eve. So I just drove, my headlights cutting through falling snow, streets emptying as decent folks settled in for the holiday. It must have been close to midnight when I realized I'd been circling the same few blocks, passing heritage rides from a distance, afraid to get too close but unable to stay away. Our sign glowed through the snow, the neon outline of a '65 Mustang that Dad had insisted on when we opened. People remember the details, he'd said. Dad, what would he think of all this? You ever notice how Mark's always short on his register? Walt had asked me last spring. Our accountant wasn't one to gossip, but he'd known Dad from their army days, watched us grow up. He's just sloppy with the small stuff, I'd answered, making excuses like I always did. The dashboard clock read 2:17 a.m. when I stopped at a red light downtown. No other cars in sight, just me and the ghosts of my own stupidity. A city salt truck rumbled through the intersection, amber lights flashing as it spread its load across slick pavement. Those pulsing lights mirrored the Mustang's vanishing taillights in my mind, both disappearing into darkness. You checking the invoices like I showed you? Dad had asked a month before his heart attack. I'd nodded, not mentioning how Mark kept reorganizing the filing system, making it impossible to track anything. The salt truck's tires crunched through fresh snow, its mechanical spreading arms swinging back and forth. Methodical, relentless. Just like Mark's betrayal must have been. planned for months, maybe years. I could see it now. Mark rolling Dad's Mustang onto the showroom turntable Monday morning, telling some eager buyer how he'd personally restored every inch. The car Dad and I had rebuilt together, our hands sharing the same tools, would become another chip in Mark's poker game. My throat tightened. Had Dad been wrong to trust us both equally? He'd split the business 50-50, believing brothers would always protect each other's interests. Blood runs thicker than motor oil, he'd joke. But maybe he should have seen what I'd refused to. Mark's jealousy, his shortcuts, his hunger for quick wins. Remember that summer when Mark borrowed on my date to the county fair? Or when my first paycheck from Max Auto mysteriously vanished from my dresser? Or last year, when 3 classic carburetors went missing after that poker game he hosted in the shop? I'd buried every red flag under brotherly loyalty. Stupid. So damn stupid. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Probably Rachel wondering where I'd disappeared to after dinner. Or maybe, hope flared briefly, the police calling to say they'd verified the restraining order was fake. I glanced down at the notification. Alert. Account balance 00. Heritage Rides, business checking. My hand shot out, grabbing the phone. I swiped through to my banking app, fingers trembling so badly I had to try twice to enter my password. The screen loaded, numbers appearing in neat, terrible rows. Checking, 0.0. Savings, 0.0. Business reserve, 0.0. I jabbed at the transaction history. There it was, a transfer of $187,342.16 at 11:43 p.m. to an external account. The entire operating capital, emergency fund, and next quarter's overhead, gone. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering into the footwell. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out the heater's drone. This wasn't just about the shop or Dad's Mustang anymore. This was everything. Every dollar we'd saved, every customer deposit, every penny needed to keep the lights on. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, breath coming in short gasps that fogged the windshield. The magnitude of Mark's betrayal expanded beyond steel and chrome into a complete dismantling of my life. He hadn't just taken our business. He'd salted the earth behind him. A car horn blared, startling me. The light had turned green, but I sat frozen, unable to move. The driver behind me leaned on his horn again, then swerved around. The driver's angry face briefly illuminated in my mirror. Green meant go, but where? Where could I possibly go now? What direction made sense when your destination had been stolen? The traffic signal cycled to yellow, then red again, and still I sat there. Engine idling, heater blowing, snow accumulating on the windshield. My phone lay dark at my feet, its message delivered. The city slept under its Christmas blanket of white, and I remained at the intersection, hands locked on the wheel, unsure which way to turn next. My apartment looked like someone else's life when I finally dragged myself through the door. Dawn was just breaking, pale pink light filtering through blinds I'd forgotten to close. Everything sat exactly where I'd left it yesterday. Coffee mug by the sink, mail stacked on the counter, that book on carburetor restoration dog-eared on page 87. But it all felt wrong somehow, like walking into a museum exhibit of my former existence. I shed my coat, kicked off my shoes, and made a beeline for my laptop. The Christmas tree lights I'd left on blinked in sad, rhythmic pulses, casting colored shadows across the keyboard. My fingers trembled as I typed in passwords, opened tabs, and started the grim inventory. Personal checking, $742.13. Personal savings, $2,861.007. Credit card available, $40,200. Not enough. Not nearly enough to fight what was coming. I pulled up the Heritage Rides accounts next, though I already knew what I'd find. Zero balances stared back at me from every screen. Our vendor account showed a $3,200 overdraft. The payroll account read, access restricted, contact your branch. The emergency fund we'd built over 5 years displayed, transfer pending, processing. Processing my ass, I muttered, clicking through to the details. That's when I saw it, a system notification banner stretching across the top of the screen. Holiday notice. Due to Federal Reserve processing schedules, all transfers initiated between December 22 and 25 will be finalized by 12 p.m. EST on December 26th. After this time, transactions become irreversible without court order. I checked my phone. 6:17 a.m., December 25th, Christmas morning. 48 hours minus sleep, minus finding a lawyer on Christmas, minus navigating whatever legal labyrinth Mark had constructed. The math made my stomach turn. I was already burning daylight, and I hadn't even started fighting back. I slammed my palm against the desk, sending a coffee mug rattling. Rage surged through me like a fuel line suddenly unclogged. But what good was anger against planning this calculated? Mark must have orchestrated this weeks, maybe months ago. The restraining order, the account transfers, the timing with the holiday weekend. This wasn't impulsive. This was a blueprint for theft. Ever seen a timing belt snap inside an engine? 1 second everything's running perfect. Next second, you've got valves punching through pistons. That's what this felt like. Precision destruction. I reached for my phone and scrolled to W. Walt Kearney had been our accountant since before Dad died. 70-something. Vietnam vet, wore the same 3 sweater vests in rotation. Mark thought he was a dinosaur, but Dad always said, Walt's forgotten more about business than most CPAs will ever learn. I hit dial, not caring that the sun had barely cracked the horizon on Christmas morning. 3 rings, 4. I was about to hang up when a gruff voice answered. This better be good. Walt, it's Ethan. I need help. Emergency help. A pause, then the sound of bedsheets rustling. You sound like hell, son. Mark's taken everything. The words caught in my throat. The shop, the accounts, Dad's Mustang, everything. Jesus Christ. Walt's voice sharpened instantly. When? Last night, Christmas Eve. He's emptied every account, and there's some holiday processing deadline. If I don't reverse it by noon on the 26th, it's gone for good. 48-hour window, Walt said, already thinking like the accountant he was. Smart bastard. Banks close early today. Closed tomorrow. Courts too. Can you come over? I need to know what options I have. Give me 30 minutes. Put coffee on. Strong. The line went dead. I set the phone down and moved to the kitchen on autopilot, measuring grounds, filling the reservoir. The machine gurgled to life, and I leaned against the counter, staring at nothing. Time. It all came down to time now. Dad taught me to break down complex repairs into segments. Isolate the problem. Calculate the hours needed. Add 20% for complications. I'd rebuilt transmissions, restored frames, reupholstered interiors using that method. Now I needed to apply it to saving everything we'd built. 48 hours, minus 7 already gone. 41 hours remaining. Minus what? 8 hours to find a lawyer willing to work on Christmas? Another 4 to prepare documents? How many hours to get in front of a judge during a holiday? How many to freeze accounts, prove fraud, undo whatever legal trap Mark had set? The coffee maker beeped. I poured a cup, not tasting it as I swallowed. The clock on the microwave read 6:42 a.m. Every minute that passed was another minute Mark had to cover his tracks, move money further away, solidify his position. I'd spent 20 years learning how to restore broken machines to perfect working order. I could diagnose a transmission problem by sound alone, rebuild a carburetor blindfolded. But this was different. This was my life being stripped for parts while I watched, the clock ticking down with ruthless precision. By the time Walt's knock came at the door, I'd filled 3 pages with notes, questions, and half-formed plans. The first hour of my 41 was already gone, evaporated like morning dew under a rising sun that didn't care about stolen legacies or betrayed brothers. I opened the door to Walt's weathered face, his gray eyebrows drawn together in concern. He carried a leather briefcase that looked as old as he was. "Merry Christmas," he said grimly. "Let's get to work." Walt didn't just bring himself. He brought reinforcements. A thermos of black coffee strong enough to strip paint. A war room laptop that looked military-grade compared to my ancient desktop. And the kind of determination I'd only seen in men who'd survived real battles. "You look like hell warmed over," he said, setting his ancient leather briefcase on my kitchen table, his bushy gray eyebrows pinched together as he surveyed the scattered papers I'd been frantically scribbling on. "Feel worse than I look," I admitted, pouring him coffee into the cleanest mug I could find. "Thanks for coming, especially today." Walt waved off my gratitude. already flipping open his laptop. Family's visiting tomorrow anyway. Today I'm all yours. He took a sip of coffee and nodded approvingly. Let's see what that brother of yours has been up to. For the next hour, Walt's fingers danced across his keyboard like a man half his age. He'd occasionally grunt, scribble something in his notepad, then dive back in. I paced behind him, catching glimpses of bank statements, transfer records, and corporate filings I'd never seen before. Sit down before you wear a hole in your floor, Walt finally said. I've got something. I pulled up a chair, heart pounding. Tell me, it's good news. Depends on your definition of good. He turned the screen toward me. See these ACH transfer authorizations? The signatures don't match your handwriting samples from previous years, tax documents, forged, and not particularly well. My breath caught. You can prove that. That's just the appetizer. Walt clicked through several more screens. Your brother's been busy. Created an anonymous LLC in Nevada 3 months ago. Been funneling small amounts, nothing that would trigger alerts. Since October. The betrayal felt fresh again, like a knife twisting deeper. 3 months? While we were working side by side every day? Walt nodded grimly. Classic embezzlement pattern. Test the waters with small transfers, then go for the kill when you're confident. He pointed to a transaction dated December 23rd. This was the trial run for the big move. 10 grand to make sure the pipeline worked. I leaned closer, studying the numbers that represented my life being drained away. This is enough, right? We can take this to the police, to a judge. It's enough to prove fraud, Walt confirmed, his weathered face showing the first hint of satisfaction. With the forged signatures and the hidden company structure, we've got him dead to rights. For the first time since reading Lily's crayon note, I felt a flicker of hope. Dad used to say that evidence beats lies every time. We had evidence now. We need to file an emergency injunction, I said, already reaching for my jacket. Today, right now. Walt nodded, closing his laptop and carefully placing it in his briefcase alongside a portable hard drive. County Courthouse has a holiday annex open until noon for emergencies. If we hustle, we might catch them. 20 minutes later, we pulled into the nearly empty courthouse parking lot. A single security guard nodded sleepily as we explained our mission. He pointed us toward a basement office where a skeleton crew handled holiday emergencies. The clerk looked bored until Walt mentioned financial fraud and embezzlement. Her eyes widened slightly as he explained the situation. I'll need to print these exhibits, Walt said, gesturing to his briefcase. And we'll need everything notarized. The clerk pointed to a small business center down the hall. Printers there, notaries across the street at the UPS store, if they're open. Walt headed for the business center while I dug through my wallet for identification the notary would need. I'll run these over and be right back, I told him. Hurry, Walt said, already setting up his laptop. We've got maybe 40 minutes before they close up shop. The UPS store was, miraculously, open. The notary took her sweet time examining my driver's license, making small talk about Christmas plans while I silently screamed for her to hurry. Finally, she stamped the affidavit Walt had prepared. I jogged back to the courthouse, clutching the notarized document like a winning lottery ticket. But when I turned the corner into the business center, I stopped cold. Walt stood in the middle of the room, face ashen. His briefcase lay on the floor, the lock clearly pried open. Papers were scattered everywhere. What happened? I asked, already knowing the answer. Someone took everything, Walt said, his voice hollow. I stepped out for 2 minutes to ask the clerk a question. When I came back, he gestured helplessly at the emptied briefcase. I felt sick. The hard drive with the evidence, the printed exhibits, every digital breadcrumb we'd collected, gone. The external drive? I asked, desperate. Walt shook his head. Gone. Laptop, too. A janitor pushing a trash cart paused in the doorway, looking curiously at the mess. Did you see anyone come in here? I demanded. The man scratched his chin. Saw a fella in a leather jacket. Thought he belonged here. Went out the side door, about 5 minutes ago. Mark. It had to be. Somehow he'd known we were here, what we were doing. I stood in the empty business center, watching our evidence evaporate like morning mist. Every damning file, Every forged document, every proof of Mark's betrayal, vanished into the winter wind. I sat in my pickup for a long time, engine off, watching snowflakes gather on the windshield. Each one landed, held its perfect shape for a heartbeat, then melted away, just like my chances of saving heritage rides. Without that evidence, I was just a bitter brother making accusations. The dashboard clock read 2:17 p.m., 44 hours until the bank transfers became permanent. The walls were closing in, and I couldn't see a way out. When I finally pulled into my apartment complex, my headlights swept across a small figure huddled on my front stoop. For a second, I thought it was just snow piled against the door. Then it moved. Lily. My heart jumped to my throat. I killed the engine and rushed over, finding my niece bundled in a puffy pink coat at least 2 sizes too big. Her cheeks flushed from the cold. "Lily, what are you doing here? How did you—" "Uncle Ethan," she whispered, her breath making little clouds in the freezing air. She clutched something against her chest. Her tablet, the one she used for her documentaries about the shop. "Mom and Dad think I'm sleeping." I glanced around the parking lot, suddenly paranoid. If Mark found out she was here— "Bo, come inside, quick," I said, fumbling with my keys. "You're freezing." Once inside, I cranked up the heat and wrapped her in the Afghan from my couch. "Lily, you can't just disappear like that. Your parents must be worried sick." She shook her head, strawberry blonde curls bouncing. "They're not home. They went to meet some men about the shop." Her eyes, so much like my father's, held a wisdom beyond her 7 years. "I took the bus. I remembered the address from when we brought you soup when you had the flu." Jesus. A 7-year-old on public transit alone, in December. The thought made me dizzy with fear. "I had to show you," she said, powering up her tablet. "It's important." "Show me what? Lily pad?" She didn't answer, just tapped at the screen with small fingers. Then she turned it toward me, hitting play on a video. The image was shaky, clearly filmed by someone trying not to be seen. The camera peered through what looked like partly open closet doors. Our family room came into view, the one at Mark and Becky's house. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows. Mark paced back and forth, agitated, while Becky sat on the arm of the sofa. They were mid-conversation. "Just need to make it look convincing," Mark was saying. "The policy covers arson, but only if it's not by the owners." My blood ran cold. "What if someone gets hurt?" Becky asked. But her tone wasn't concerned. It was calculating. Mark laughed, a sound I once associated with childhood mischief, but now sent shivers down my spine. "Nobody's going to get hurt. The place will be empty. We set it up, drop a few of Ethan's things around, maybe that old lighter he always carries, and make an anonymous call about him arguing with someone there earlier." "His temper." Becky nodded. "Everyone knows about his temper." "Exactly. Big Brother's bad temper finally cost him everything. Meanwhile, we're safely away with witnesses, the money's already transferred, and the insurance payout is just icing on the cake." I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to tilt around me as I watched my brother and his wife casually discuss destroying not just my livelihood, but my father's legacy, and framing me for it. "When?" Becky asked. "Tomorrow night, after the bank closes but before anyone can start asking questions about the transfers." The flames in their fireplace reflected in Mark's eyes, hungry and eager. I felt those same flames already consuming my future, my reputation, everything I'd built. "What about Ethan?" Becky's voice had dropped lower, making me lean toward the tablet. Mark's face hardened. "What about him? He'll be ruined. Probably face charges, but that's his problem." The video continued for another minute before cutting off abruptly. I sat frozen, the tablet heavy in my hands. Lily watching me with those solemn eyes. "I hid in the closet when they started talking about the shop," she said quietly. "I know that's eavesdropping, but Dad said mean things about you, and I wanted to know why." I stared at the paused image on the screen. Mark's face caught in a smirk that I now recognized as the face of a stranger. This little girl had risked everything to bring me this evidence. She'd slipped me that warning note at dinner, then followed up with proof when no one else could help. Did I do something bad? She asked, uncertainty creeping into her voice. I set the tablet down carefully and pulled her into a hug. No, lily pad. You did something brave. Really brave. My voice caught, but also really dangerous. We need to get you home before they realize you're gone. But the video, I'm going to save it right now, I said, already reaching for my phone to make a backup. This changes everything. As I worked, a sudden gust of wind rattled the apartment windows, making both of us jump. It was as if the night itself was urging me forward, telling me it was time to strike back. I saved the video to my phone, then hit play again. I needed to make sure I hadn't missed anything. Mark's voice filled my small living room again, laying out his arson scheme with the casual tone of someone discussing weekend plans. Remember, a woman's voice said from off-camera, if anyone asks where you were, you stick with dinner at my place. I'll back you up. My finger jabbed the pause button so hard I nearly cracked the screen. That voice. I knew that voice. Amy. My ex-wife. I rewound. Played it again. There was no mistaking it. Amy's precise, measured tone. The slight clip on her consonants. I'd listened to that voice for 12 years of marriage. Play it from the beginning again. I whispered to Lily, who looked concerned at my sudden pallor. She obliged, and this time I paid attention to the background. There, in the shadows behind Mark, a flash of blonde hair, the edge of a tailored blazer. The camera angle hadn't caught her face, but she moved into frame briefly as she handed Mark a folder. These are the account records you'll need, Amy said, her voice clearer now. Make sure you transfer everything before noon on the 26th. The holiday processing freeze works in our favor. Mark nodded. And you're sure the restraining order will hold until then? I dated a court clerk for 3 months just to learn these loopholes, Amy replied with a laugh that sent ice through my veins. Trust me, Ethan won't be able to touch the shop until after the transfers are permanent. By then, it won't matter what he can prove. My hands trembled as I set the tablet down. The room seemed to tilt and spin around me. The double betrayal hit like a 1-2 punch. My brother and my ex-wife, working together to destroy me. I remembered Amy's face in divorce court 2 years ago. Her gray eyes cold with contempt as she detailed my obsession with the shop, how I'd chosen dead cars over a living marriage. She'd wanted half of heritage rides in the settlement, claimed she'd invested in it emotionally. The judge hadn't agreed. Looks like she found another way to get what she wanted, I muttered. Who's that lady? Uncle Ethan? Lily asked, peering at the screen. I swallowed hard. Someone I used to know. I checked the timestamp on the video, 7:42 p.m., just hours ago, while we were having Christmas Eve dinner. They must have stepped away to finalize details, never suspecting a 7-year-old detective was documenting everything. The arson wasn't some distant threat. It was happening tomorrow night, less than 24 hours away. Lily, when did your dad say they were going to... I stopped myself, not wanting to scare her with talk of fire. When did they say they were doing this? After I go to Grandma's tomorrow, she said. Mom's taking me there for Christmas night. Getting her safely away. Of course. Suddenly, a woman's voice called from the hallway outside my apartment. Lily, Lily, are you in there? Becky. My pulse spiked. Lily's eyes went wide with panic. That's Mom. She must have checked my room. I glanced frantically around the apartment. If Becky found the tablet here, she'd know exactly what we'd seen. Mark and Amy would destroy the evidence and accelerate their plan. Quick, I whispered, lifting the couch cushion. Hide it under here. Lily slipped the tablet beneath the cushion just as a sharp knock rattled my door. Ethan, I know you're in there. Is Lily with you? Becky's voice was tight with accusation. I put my finger to my lips, motioning Lily to stay quiet as I crossed to the door. My heart hammered against my ribs like a piston gone wild. Just a second, I called, trying to keep my voice steady. I looked down at Lily, her face pale but determined. Don't say anything about the video, I whispered. Not a word. She nodded solemnly. The doorknob turned. I'd forgotten to lock it after letting Lily in. Becky pushed the door open before I could reach it. her eyes wild with a mix of anger and fear that looked almost convincing. "What the hell are you doing with my daughter?" she demanded, scanning the room until she spotted Lily. "Do you have any idea how worried we've been? Mark is out driving around looking for her." I forced myself to breathe normally, to not show that I knew, that I'd seen her plotting with my brother to burn down my shop and frame me for it, that I'd heard my ex-wife coaching them through it all. The weight of their betrayal pressed against my chest like an engine block, but I kept my face neutral. Lily showed up at my door. I said calmly, "I was about to call you." Becky stormed past me, grabbing Lily's hand. "We're leaving. Now." I watched as she pulled Lily toward the door, my niece's eyes meeting mine over her shoulder. The tablet remained hidden beneath my couch cushion, the evidence of their conspiracy safely in my possession. For now. After Becky dragged Lily away, I waited 15 minutes before retrieving the tablet from under my cushion. My hands still shook as I copied the video file onto my laptop and then onto 3 separate USB drives. Insurance. If Mark got to one, I'd have backups. I called Walt again. "We need to meet. Now." "It's Christmas Eve, son," he reminded me, his voice gravelly with concern. "Yeah, and my brother's planning to burn down our shop tomorrow night." That got his attention. "Corner booth at Mel's in 20. I shoved one USB drive into my sock, another into my wallet, and the third into the lining of my jacket. The tablet went into a gym bag that I stashed in my truck's toolbox. Mark had already stolen evidence once. I wasn't giving him a second chance. The roads were empty as I drove to Mel's diner, just a few straggling cars headed to midnight church services. Christmas lights blurred past my window, their cheerful colors a mockery of the hollowness spreading through my chest. Dad's face flashed in my mind, his weathered hands showing me how to rebuild a carburetor when I was 12, patiently guiding my fingers over the parts. "Respect the machine, son. It'll tell you what it needs if you listen close enough." I was listening now, all right, and what I heard was the sound of everything he built being dismantled, piece by piece. Walt was already nursing a coffee when I slid into the vinyl booth across from him. The diner was nearly empty, just a couple of truckers at the counter and a waitress who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. "You look like hell warmed over," Walt said, pushing a mug toward me. The coffee was black and bitter, just what I needed. "Got something to show you." I pulled out my phone, opened the copied video file, and passed it across the table. Walt's bushy eyebrows climbed higher with every word from the recording. When Amy's voice came through, coaching Mark on what to say to the insurance investigator, he actually flinched. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, sliding the phone back. "That's premeditated fraud, arson, and conspiracy, all gift-wrapped with a bow. The question is, what do we do with it?" I took a long pull of coffee. "We've got no judge until Tuesday, and Mark's already emptied the accounts." Walt pulled out a small notebook and pen. Old school, just like him. He'd been doing our books since before computers were standard, and he still didn't trust anything he couldn't write by hand first. "Let's break this down," he said, scratching numbers onto the page. "Today's Christmas Eve. Banks are closed tomorrow for Christmas. They reopen the day after, but with that transfer deadline at noon. So, we've got about 36 hours before those transfers become permanent," I said, "and they're planning the fire for tomorrow night." Walt tapped his pen against the table. "Gives them perfect timing. Torch the place, then have the money safely locked away before anyone can freeze the accounts." The waitress refilled our mugs without asking. Neither of us acknowledged her. "We need 3 things," Walt continued, writing as he spoke. "First, an emergency judge to issue an injunction on those transfers. Second, we need to get this video to the insurance company before any accident happens. And third," he looked up at me, "we need to keep you away from that shop so you can't be framed." "I'm not hiding while Mark burns down my father's legacy," I growled. "Not hiding, strategizing." Walt's eyes, sharp despite his 60-plus years, fixed on mine. "Think like your dad would. When a timing belt's about to snap, you don't just gun the engine harder." He was right. Dad would approach this methodically, not emotionally. I took a deep breath, forcing the rage back down where it belonged. "There's a retired judge who owes me a favor," Walt said. Helped his grandson restore a '72 Chevelle last summer. I'll call him first thing in the morning, see if he can recommend someone who might be available for an emergency hearing. I nodded, some of the tension easing from my shoulders. And the insurance company? I've got a contact there too. We'll send them the video anonymously. They hate fraud more than anyone. Once they're alerted, they'll be watching that shop like hawks. We spent the next hour plotting, creating contingencies, covering angles. Walt's mechanical pencil scratched across his notepad, mapping out our counterattack. For the first time since reading Lily's note, I felt a flicker of hope. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Could be important, Walt said. I swiped to answer. Hello? Is this Ethan Garrett? A woman's voice, unfamiliar, sounded nervous. Speaking. I don't know if this means anything, but I work at the Gas and Go on Route 16. There was a man in here about 20 minutes ago filling up several gas cans, red plastic ones. My blood went cold. What did he look like? Trim beard, designer jacket, paid cash, which was weird for how much he spent. Mark. He was driving this beautiful classic Mustang, cherry red. I complimented him on it, and he seemed jumpy. Said something about taking it east to his shop. East, the opposite direction from Heritage Rides. When I asked why he needed so much gas, he got real short with me. Then I saw your name on the registration when he dropped it getting back in the car. The line went silent for a moment. I could hear her breathing. I shouldn't be calling, she continued, voice dropping. My manager would kill me. But my dad restored cars too, and something felt off. Which way was he headed when he left? I asked, gripping the phone tighter. Eastbound on 16, driving fast. Thank you, I said. You might have just... The line went dead. I looked up at Walt, my mouth dry. That was a gas station clerk. Mark just bought multiple gas cans, and he's driving Dad's Mustang east. Walt's face hardened. He's moving up the timeline. Walt and I flew out of that diner like the place was on fire, ironic, considering what we were trying to prevent. My truck's tires spat slush as we peeled onto Main Street, heading for the county courthouse. They close at 5 on Christmas Eve, Walt said, checking his watch. That gives us 23 minutes. I pushed the speedometer higher, weaving through holiday traffic. An SUV loaded with wrapped presents honked as I cut in front of it. Any other day, I'd have waved an apology. Today, I couldn't spare the energy. You think this will work? I asked, braking hard at a yellow light. Walt clutched the tablet with Lily's video like it was made of gold. Courts have emergency procedures, financial crimes, especially ones with evidence this clear-cut. We've got a shot. The light turned green, and I gunned it. A shot isn't good enough, not with Mark out there buying gas cans. One problem at a time, Ethan. I'd known Walt since I was a teenager. He'd done Dad's books for decades, stayed on when Mark and I took over. His calm had always balanced my intensity. Right now, though, I wanted to shake him. Didn't he understand what was at stake? If we don't get an injunction by noon on the 26th, everything's gone, I said. The shop, the cars, Dad's legacy, all of it. I know. Walt's voice was steady. But panicking won't help us think clearly. We pulled into the courthouse parking lot at 4:42 p.m. The building loomed against the darkening sky, its windows already half dark. Inside, the marble floors echoed with our hurried footsteps. Most offices were locked, their holiday decorations visible through glass doors. The clerk's office still had lights on. Thank God for small mercies. A woman in her 50s was organizing files, clearly preparing to leave. A nameplate on her desk read, Patricia Wilkins. Paper reindeer and snowflakes dangled from the ceiling tiles above her, swaying gently in the heating vent's breath. Can I help you, gentlemen? She asked without looking up. Her voice carried the flatness of someone at the end of a long shift. We need to file an emergency injunction, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's urgent. Now she did look up, her eyes tired behind reading glasses. What kind of emergency? Walt stepped forward. Financial fraud. We have video evidence of a planned arson for insurance fraud. and the perpetrator has already drained multiple accounts. If we don't get a judicial order by the bank's deadline, over $2 million will be permanently lost. Patricia sighed, setting down her stack of files. Let me guess, you need this before the holiday. Yes, I said, as soon as possible. She shook her head. I'm sorry, but there are no judges available. Everyone's gone home for Christmas. There has to be someone, I insisted. Don't you have emergency procedures? For domestic violence, child endangerment, and certain criminal matters. Yes. Her tone softened slightly. But civil matters, even financial ones, have to wait until the court reopens. When is that? Walt asked. Tuesday morning, the day after the holiday weekend. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Tuesday. The bank transfers would lock at noon on the 26th. Monday. We'd be a day too late. That's not acceptable, I said, my voice rising. My brother is planning to burn down our family business tomorrow night. He's already bought the gas cans. By Tuesday, there'll be nothing left to save. Patricia's eyes flicked to the clock on the wall. I'm very sorry, but there's nothing I can do. You should contact the police about the arson threat. We have, Walt said, but without a judge's order on the financial side. I understand, sir. She stood, gathering her purse. But I don't make the rules. No judges until Tuesday. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across her desk. Those paper reindeer dangled mockingly, their festive cheer completely at odds with the devastation settling in my chest. Walt tried one more angle. This is a financial emergency that will cause irreparable harm. Surely there's a provision for that. Patricia shrugged, already putting on her coat. File the paperwork. I'll make sure it's on the docket first thing Tuesday. Tuesday will be too late, I said through clenched teeth. I'm sorry. She wasn't being cruel, just matter of fact. That's our policy. Merry Christmas. And with that, she switched off her desk lamp and walked past us, keys jingling in her hand. We stood there for a moment in the half-dark office, the reality of our situation sinking in. No judge, no injunction, no way to stop the transfers before they became permanent. Walt put his hand on my shoulder. Come on, let's regroup. We stepped into the hallway, our footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The sound of Patricia's heels clicked down the corridor and faded away, leaving only silence. I stopped in front of the closed courtroom doors. Through the small windows, I could see the bench where a judge should be sitting, listening to our case, where someone should be issuing the orders that would freeze Mark's stolen money and protect heritage rides. But the room was dark, and it would stay dark until Tuesday. I pictured flames licking at the shop's walls, the gleaming hoods of restored classics bubbling under intense heat. Dad's tools, the ones I'd learned on as a boy, warping and melting. All while Mark watched from a safe distance, knowing the money was already his. My fists clenched so tight I felt my fingernails cut into my palms. A warm trickle told me I'd drawn blood, but I couldn't feel the pain. All I felt was rage, helplessness, and the crushing weight of failure. Let's get some air, Walt muttered, tugging gently at my sleeve. I followed him mechanically, barely registering the green exit sign or the heavy door he pushed open. The blast of December wind hit me like a physical blow, shocking my lungs and stinging my face. The courthouse steps stretched down to a nearly empty parking lot, everything dusted with fresh snow that glowed blue-white under the security lights. This isn't over, Walt said, his breath clouding. We've still got options. But I couldn't hear him anymore. The cold was seeping through my jacket, past my skin, right into my bones. Each inhale felt like swallowing ice, and something was breaking inside me with every breath. What options? I finally asked, my voice hollow. The banks are closed. The courts are closed. The cops won't touch the shop because of that bullshit restraining order. I shoved my hands deep in my pockets. And Mark's out there right now with gas cans. Walt started to respond, but I wasn't listening. My mind was already racing ahead, watching the next 48 hours unfold like a movie I couldn't stop. Mark torching heritage rides, the bank transfers locking permanently, insurance investigators finding just enough evidence to deny the claim. Everything Dad built, everything we built, Gone in a weekend. I could almost hear Dad's voice, the way it sounded those final weeks in hospice. Gentle, resigned, with that slight rasp. Maybe it's gone, son. Some battles you just can't win. The memory knocked something loose inside me. Maybe Dad was right. Maybe this was one of those moments where fighting only prolonged the inevitable. What if we just let it go? The words fell from my mouth before I could stop them. Walt's bushy eyebrows shot up. What? Let Mark have it. I stared out at the empty street. Let him burn it down. Let him take the money. A strange calm was settling over me, like the snow blanketing the world. Maybe this is where it ends. You ever feel your whole body go numb at once? Not just your fingers or toes, but everything. Like your soul decided to step out for a smoke break and left your body behind. That's where I was standing on those courthouse steps. Walt's hand landed on my shoulder, a warm anchor I could barely feel through the fog of surrender. His fingers dug in, trying to reach me, but even that reassurance seemed to slide off my skin like rain on wax. Snowflakes caught in my eyelashes, smearing the streetlights into soft halos. The world narrowed down, edges blurring white, sound dampened to a distant hum. For a second, I wondered if this was what giving up felt like. This strange, empty peace. So that's it. Walt's voice cut through the quiet. You're just gonna roll over and let him win. I didn't answer. Couldn't find the words. Your old man would be ashamed. That should have stung, but I just shrugged. Dad's gone. The shop's gonna be gone. What difference does it make now? Walt stepped in front of me, his face hardening in the harsh light. You quitting, Ethan? That word, quitting, hung in the frigid air between us. Because that's what this sounds like, he continued, his voice rising. Sounds like quitting to me. I still couldn't answer him. The word echoed like a slap. But I stood there taking it, too numb to fight back, too tired to care. Walt was saying something else now. Something about backup plans and second angles, but his voice faded into the background as I watched snowflakes spiral down under the streetlights. It would be so easy to walk away, to accept that some things just aren't meant to be saved. In the distance, sirens wailed, probably heading to some other Christmas Eve emergency. The sound cut through the cotton wool silence in my head, high and urgent. It reminded me of the night Dad had his first heart attack. How those same sirens had jolted me awake at 3 a.m, how I'd followed the ambulance to the hospital, refusing to believe it could be serious. Dad had pulled through that time, fought his way back. Something flickered inside me. Not hope exactly, but something adjacent to it. A small, stubborn ember that refused to go cold. The sirens faded, but that tiny spark remained, glowing brighter against the darkness that had nearly swallowed me whole. I looked at Walt, really looked at him for the first time since we'd stepped outside. His face was lined with worry, his eyes fixed on mine, waiting for some sign that I was still in there. You're right, I said finally, my voice rough. I can't quit. The words came slowly at first, then faster. Dad never quit on anything in his life. Not the shop, not me, not even when the cancer was eating him alive. Walt nodded, relief washing over his features. So what now? He asked. Get in the truck. Walt's voice had a steel edge I'd never heard before. I followed him across the parking lot, snow crunching under our boots. The old Dodge Ram sat hulking under a streetlight, its faded red paint looking almost black in the dim glow. What's the plan? I asked, climbing into the passenger seat. The vinyl was ice cold against my back. Walt didn't answer right away. He cranked the engine, which roared to life with a rumble that matched his mood. The heater coughed out a blast of frigid air before slowly warming. I didn't want to mention this earlier, he said, reaching between the seats for his battered leather briefcase. Didn't think we'd need it. The briefcase looked like it had survived several wars. Which, knowing Walt's history in Vietnam, it probably had. The brass clasps were tarnished, and one corner was reinforced with what looked like duct tape. This need what? I leaned closer, as Walt flipped through a stack of dog-eared papers. This. He pulled out a single sheet, its edges yellowed with age. Ohio Revised Code, Section 1701. 94. Special provisions for veterans retaining businesses critical to livelihood. I squinted at the fine print. What am I looking at? A loophole. Walt tapped the paper. Veterans who own or co-own businesses essential to their income can petition any on-call magistrate for emergency hearings, even during court holidays. The truck's dome light cast shadows across his face, deepening the lines around his eyes. For the first time, I noticed how the years had mapped themselves onto him. Not just in the silver hair or the creased skin, but in the steady, unflinching way he held himself. "You're a veteran," I said slowly, pieces clicking into place. 32 months in Vietnam, Bronze Star recipient, he said it matter-of-factly, without pride or embellishment. And I own 3% of Heritage Rides. My mind raced back to when we'd set up the business. Dad had insisted on giving Walt a small stake. For all the times he kept us from going under with his creative bookkeeping, he'd said with a wink. "Will that be enough?" I asked. "It better be." Walt was already dialing a number on his ancient flip phone. "This is the emergency judicial hotline. Haven't used it in 15 years, but it should still work." The truck's heater was finally pumping out warm air, but I barely noticed. Every cell in my body was focused on Walt's conversation. "Yes, ma'am. Walter James Conroy. Service number 258371009. His voice took on a formal cadence I'd never heard before. "Requesting emergency hearing under ORC 1701-94. I watched his face for any sign of how it was going. His expression remained neutral, giving nothing away. "Yes, ma'am. Heritage Classic Automobiles, LLC. I hold a 3% stake. Business is under immediate threat of fraudulent transfer and potential arson." There was a long pause. I could hear a tinny voice on the other end asking questions. "Yes, we have video evidence," Walt continued. "Time sensitive due to banking freeze provisions." Another pause. Walt's knuckles whitened around the phone. "Understood. We'll be there in 45 minutes. He snapped the phone shut and threw the truck into reverse. "They're patching us through to Magistrate Chen," he said, backing out of the parking space with more speed than caution. "If we can get to the county administration building within the hour, she'll hear us out." The tires spun on the icy pavement before catching grip. Snow sprayed in our wake as Walt accelerated toward the highway. "We've got one shot at this," he said, eyes fixed on the road. "Better make sure that video works." I pulled Lily's tablet from my coat pocket, heart pounding. The battery indicator showed 42%, enough, if we were lucky. I connected the thumb drive Walt had given me earlier and started the file transfer. "How far is the county building?" I asked, watching the progress bar inch forward. 20 miles. Should take 30 minutes in this weather." Walt hunched over the steering wheel, peering through the windshield as snowflakes swirled in our headlights. "If we don't hit any drifts." The exit ramp lights streaked past in blurs of yellow and white. I felt the shift happening inside me. Despair giving way to something sharper, more focused. The numb fog that had clouded my mind was burning off, replaced by calculated urgency. "Copy's done," I said, ejecting the thumb drive. "Let me test it." I plugged the drive into the tablet's USB adapter and tapped the file. A buffering wheel appeared, spinning lazily against the black screen. "Come on," I muttered. "Come on." Walt took a corner faster than he should have, and I braced myself against the dashboard. "Sorry," he grunted. "Shortcut." The buffering wheel kept spinning. I tapped the screen again, harder this time, as if that would help. "How much time we got?" I asked. Walt glanced at the dashboard clock. 28 minutes. The video finally loaded, showing Mark and his wife in their living room. I fast-forwarded to make sure the crucial part was there. The discussion about torching Heritage Rides, the insurance fraud, Amy's voice in the background. "It's all here," I said, relief flooding through me. "We've got him!" We were 15 minutes from the magistrate's chambers when the screen suddenly froze. The image of Mark mid-sentence turned pixelated, then black. "No, no, no." I jabbed at the power button, The tablet remained dark. "What happened?" Walt asked, eyes still on the road. "I don't know. It just died." I tried rebooting, holding down the power button until my finger ached. Nothing. "Battery should be almost half full." Panic rose in my throat. "This can't be happening." Walt's jaw tightened as he pressed harder on the accelerator. "Try the thumb drive on my laptop. Back seat." I twisted around, grabbing for the ancient ThinkPad tucked behind Walt's seat. My hands shook as I booted it up and plugged in the drive. The computer hummed to life, its fan whirring loudly in the cab of the truck. I navigated to the external drive and double-clicked the video file. The screen showed loading, and then a buffering wheel appeared. The buffering wheel kept spinning on Walt's laptop. I could feel sweat beating at my temples despite the truck's cold interior. Come on," I muttered, tapping my finger against the side of the computer. Walt took a sharp turn, and I had to grab the dashboard with my free hand to keep from sliding across the seat. "Almost there," he said, nodding toward a squat brick building ahead. Its windows were mostly dark except for a few scattered lights on the second floor. The file finally loaded, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "It works. We're good." Walt pulled into a reserved parking space near the entrance, not bothering to check if we were allowed to park there. "Grab everything," he said, already opening his door. "We've got 8 minutes." The night air hit me like a slap as I scrambled out of the truck, clutching the laptop to my chest. Snow crunched under our boots as we hurried toward the building entrance. A lone security guard sat behind a desk in the lobby, looking up from his crossword puzzle as we burst through the doors. "Veterans Emergency Hearing," Walt announced, flashing his ID. "Magistrate Chen is expecting us." The guard checked a clipboard, then nodded. "Second floor, room 214. Sign in here." We scribbled our names and headed for the elevator. The doors seemed to take forever to close, and I found myself bouncing on the balls of my feet, willing the ancient machinery to move faster. "You ready for this?" Walt asked as we ascended. I nodded, clutching the laptop tighter. No choice now. The elevator dinged, and we stepped out into a dimly lit hallway. Room 214 was at the far end, a slice of light visible beneath the door. Walt knocked 3 times, then opened it without waiting for a response. The chamber was smaller than I'd expected, more like a conference room than a courtroom. A woman in her 50s sat behind a desk piled with manila folders and legal pads. She wore a black robe over what looked like a sweater, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun. Dark circles under her eyes suggested we weren't the only ones missing sleep tonight. "Magistrate Chen," Walt said, stepping forward. "Thank you for seeing us on such short notice." She glanced at her watch. "You're cutting it close, gentlemen. I have another matter at 4. Her voice was clipped, efficient. "You mentioned evidence of potential arson and fraud?" "Yes, Your Honor." Walt gestured to me. "This is Ethan Garrett, co-owner of Heritage Rides Classic Automobiles. His brother has emptied their business accounts and is planning to torch their shop for insurance money." The magistrate raised an eyebrow. "And you have proof of this claim?" I stepped forward, opening the laptop. "Video evidence, Your Honor. Recorded earlier today by my niece." I set the computer on her desk and hit play, but nothing happened. The screen had gone black again. "I'm sorry," I stammered, panic rising. "It was working just a minute ago." Walt moved beside me. "May I?" He took the laptop and examined it, his weathered fingers moving with surprising dexterity across the keyboard. "Battery's fine, but the file's corrupted somehow." He pulled out the thumb drive and reinserted it. "Let me try something else." The magistrate sighed, checking her watch again. "Mr. Garrett, I understand your urgency, but I need to see evidence before I can issue any orders." "Please," I said, hating the desperation in my voice. "My brother is going to destroy everything my father built. We have the proof, right here. If we can just—" "Got it," Walt interrupted. He turned to the magistrate. "Do you have a projection system or TV we can connect to?" She pointed to a wall-mounted monitor, HDMI port on the side. Walt rummaged in his briefcase and pulled out a cable. Within seconds, he had the laptop connected to the monitor. The screen flickered, then came to life. "There we go," he said, relief evident in his voice. He pressed play. The footage filled the room, slightly grainy but unmistakable. Mark and his wife sat on their couch, fireplace crackling behind them. Mark's voice came through clearly. "Once the place burns down, insurance pays out double what it's worth. We blame it on Ethan's temper. Say he threatened to torch it rather than let me have control." I watched the magistrate's expression change as Amy's voice filtered in from off-camera, coaching Mark on what to say to the insurance company. Lily's occasional whispered commentary, "That's not true, Daddy," made it all the more damning. Magistrate Chen's jaw tightened. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. "This is Magistrate Chen. I need to add someone to this call." She paused. "Yes, now. It's regarding a potential insurance fraud case." A few minutes later, a new voice joined us through the speakerphone. "This is Trevor Wells, on-call adjuster for Midwest Commercial Insurance. Mr. Wells, I have 2 gentlemen in my chambers with video evidence of a planned insurance fraud involving arson. Are you able to view a video transmission?" "Yes, ma'am. I can receive a video call." Walt quickly set up a video conference, positioning the laptop so the insurance adjuster could see the monitor. We replayed the footage, and I heard the clicking of a keyboard through the phone speaker. "I'm screen capturing this for our records and chain of custody," Wells said. "Can I get the names of all parties involved?" The magistrate took notes as I provided the details: names, addresses, business information. When the video ended, she sat back in her chair, fingers steepled under her chin. "Based on the evidence presented, I'm issuing an emergency warrant and a preservation order on Heritage Rides effective immediately." She began writing on an official form. "This will freeze any further financial transactions and prevent any physical alterations to the property until a full hearing can be scheduled." Relief washed over me, but it was quickly tempered by reality. Until officers served the warrant, Mark remained free, and the shop was still vulnerable. "How soon can this be enforced?" I asked. "I'll contact the sheriff's department as soon as we finish here," she said, signing the bottom of the form with a flourish. "But given the hour and the weather, it may take some time for officers to respond." I glanced at the wall clock. 3:07 ABOT M. No sirens yet, no cavalry rushing to save what remained of my life's work. "Thank you, Your Honor," I said, trying to mask my impatience. "We appreciate your time." She handed the signed documents to Walt. "Make copies of that video for the court record. And Mr. Garrett," her eyes met mine, "stay away from your brother until the authorities handle this. The last thing you need is to give him ammunition against you." I sat in the back of Officer Ramirez's squad car, my breath fogging the window as I stared out at the river dock. The heater fought against the bitter December cold, but nothing could warm the chill that had settled in my bones since reading Lily's note. Ramirez had insisted I stay in the vehicle, "for your own protection, sir," while the operation unfolded. "They've got a visual on the Mustang," he said, eyes fixed on his radio. "Stand by." The minutes crawled by like hours. I rubbed my hands together, remembering how Dad's fingers would turn blue in the unheated garage during winter restorations. "Cold hands make careful work," he'd say, his breath visible as he meticulously aligned a headlight bezel. Those same careful hands had built everything Mark was trying to burn to the ground. "All units converge," crackled the radio. "Suspect is on site." Suddenly, the quiet riverfront erupted with activity. 3 cruisers rolled in silently, lights off, converging on a spot just beyond my line of sight. Ramirez's hand went to his holster. "Stay here," he ordered, then slipped out into the darkness. I couldn't see much through the frosted glass, so I cracked the door open, just enough to hear and get a better view. The biting wind carried voices across the parking lot. "Police! Don't move! Hands where we can see them!" Flashlight beams cut through the darkness, illuminating the scene in stark white slices. There was Dad's Mustang, cherry red even in the dim light, its exhaust creating a ghostly plume that drifted over the water. And there was Mark, standing beside it, 3 plastic gas cans at his feet. His face, caught in the harsh light, shifted from confusion to shock as officers surrounded him. He didn't resist when they pulled his arms behind his back. The metallic click of handcuffs carried clearly through the still night air. "What the hell is this?" I heard him shout. "I'm just going fishing." At 4 in the morning, with gasoline. An officer lifted one of the cans. "Pretty flammable bait, sir." I pushed the door open wider, unable to stay put any longer. The cold hit me like a slap, but I barely noticed as I stepped out onto the frozen gravel. No one tried to stop me as I moved closer, staying behind the line of cruisers. Mark's eyes found mine through the chaos. For a split second, I saw the little brother who'd followed me everywhere, who'd begged me to teach him how to change spark plugs. Then his expression hardened, eyes burning with something I'd never seen before, a mixture of rage and betrayal that made my stomach turn. "You did this," he spat. "You couldn't just walk away, could you?" I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say that the evidence wouldn't say for us. A detective approached, notepad in hand. He nodded at me briefly before turning to the officer holding Mark. "We've got enough for arrest. Fraud, attempted arson, conspiracy." He spoke into his radio. "Suspect in custody. Proceeding with transport." As they guided Mark toward a waiting cruiser, I noticed movement at the edge of the parking lot. Car doors slammed, and figures hustled equipment from trunks. Even in the dim light, I recognized the silhouettes of cameras on tripods. Local news. Someone had tipped them off. "Sir, you might want to head back to the car." Officer Ramirez appeared at my side. "Press is showing up." I nodded but didn't move. Part of me wanted to hide from the cameras, to keep our family's shame private. But another part, the part that remembered every time Mark had lied to my face while emptying our accounts, wanted to witness his public downfall. The first camera flash popped like lightning, illuminating the scene in stark white. Mark flinched, ducking his head as officers guided him into the back seat of a cruiser. Another flash, then another. The reporters were moving closer, shouting questions that blended together in the cold air. "Mr. Garrett, is it true your brother was planning to burn down your business? Was this a case of insurance fraud? How long has this family feud been going on?" I stood frozen, watching as the first headlines were being born in those flashes. Whatever they wrote would shape public perception. Would people see a calculated criminal, or would Mark somehow spin this into a sympathetic story? The right headline could ensure his reputation never recovered, while the wrong one might leave room for doubt. Camera lights bathed the scene in harsh clarity as dawn began to break over the river. Mark's cruiser pulled away, red and blue lights reflecting off the icy water. The reporters turned toward me, recognizing a potential source. Their lenses swiveled in my direction like predators sensing new prey. "Mr. Garrett, can we get a statement?" Officer Ramirez stepped between us. "No comments at this time. This is an ongoing investigation." But I knew silence wouldn't stop them from crafting their story. As the cruiser carrying my brother disappeared around the bend, I realized that while the legal battle might be turning in my favor, the court of public opinion was just beginning its deliberations. And in a small town like ours, that verdict might matter more than any judge's ruling. By midday, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I sat in Walt's cramped office, watching notifications stack up like dominoes. Someone, probably that insurance adjuster, had leaked Lily's video footage online. It spread like wildfire through our small town's digital grapevine. "Holy shit," Walt muttered, scrolling through his tablet. "Your brother's getting crucified out there." I leaned over to look. The local Facebook groups were lighting up, Mark's face frozen mid-sentence, explaining how he'd torched Dad's legacy for insurance money. His poker buddies were publicly distancing themselves in the comments. "Can't have a cheat at the table," one wrote. Always suspected something was off about his lucky streaks. Another notification pinged. RacerMart, the auto parts chain that had sponsored Mark's weekend drag racing hobby, had posted a formal statement severing ties. Their PR speak barely disguised the disgust. "Or values incompatible with our commitment to integrity in motorsports." "You ever wonder if your dad knew?" Walt asked, handing me a lukewarm coffee. The question caught me off guard. Had Dad sensed something in Mark that I'd missed? Those last months before the cancer took him, he'd insisted I keep separate records. At the time, I thought it was just his military precision. Now I wondered if he'd been trying to protect me. "I don't know," I said finally. Maybe he saw it coming. The office phone rang, its old-school bell cutting through our thoughts. Walt put it on speaker. "Walter Finnegan Accounting," he answered. "Yeah, this is Dave over at Midstate Classics." The voice sounded uncomfortable. We're, gonna need to cancel that parts agreement we had with Mark Garrett. Is his brother available? I cleared my throat. This is Ethan. Oh, Ethan, man. Look, we don't want any part of this mess, but we'd be happy to work directly with you once you're back in control of Heritage. Appreciate that, Dave. 3 more calls followed in quick succession, an insurance agent demanding a formal statement, another parts supplier, and, weirdly, Mark's dentist canceling his appointment for next week. Seemed everyone was scrambling to distance themselves from the Garrett family disgrace. Walt's radio hummed in the background. The local talk show host was having a field day. Folks, you can't make this stuff up, the host chuckled. Local businessman plots to torch Daddy's classic car shop on Christmas. Gets caught by his own niece. I'm telling you, Jerry Springer couldn't script this better. Each call, each comment, each radio jab felt like another piston stroke of justice. But I couldn't shake the uneasiness in my gut. Mark had friends in places I didn't even know about. People who owed him favors or shared his loose interpretation of ethics. You think it's over? I asked Walt. He snorted. Not by a long shot. Your brother's the type to have insurance policies that don't involve paperwork, if you catch my drift. As if on cue, my phone lit up with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Mark says you'll regret this. Some things can't be replaced. I showed Walt the message. Shit. He scratched his beard. Someone's still loyal to him. Or scared enough to do his bidding. I stood up, suddenly restless. What if they're at the shop right now? What if they're destroying evidence or Dad's things? Walt finished for me. He understood immediately. There were irreplaceable items in that shop. Dad's service medals, photos, the handwritten restoration notes that couldn't be valued in dollars. Walt grabbed his coat. We've got that preservation order. Let's go claim what's yours before someone decides to play cleanup crew. Outside, gray clouds had gathered, threatening snow. I felt the weight of the court order in my pocket as we hurried to Walt's truck. The thought of someone, maybe one of Mark's poker buddies or that mechanic who always laughed too hard at his jokes, pawing through Dad's things made my blood boil. You know? Walt said as we pulled away from the curb. Your brother didn't just lose his business today, he lost his whole damn social currency. I nodded, watching familiar streets blur past. In a town our size, reputation was everything. Dad had built his on honest work and fair deals. I tried to maintain that legacy. Mark had just torched his own, no gasoline required. Even if he somehow beats these charges, Walt continued, nobody's gonna play cards with him. Nobody's gonna loan him money. Nobody's gonna trust him with their classic cars. That was the real sentence, not whatever jail time he might face, but the permanent exclusion from the community he'd tried to exploit. As Heritage Rides came into view, its familiar red brick facade and the neon sign Dad had installed 30 years ago, I felt a surge of determination. Mark had betrayed everything this place stood for, but he hadn't won. Not yet. Let's make sure there's still something left to save, I said, clutching the court order, as Walt parked across the street. The clouds above us darkened, promising a storm, but for the first time since reading Lily's crayon note, I felt ready to weather whatever came next. The deputy's cruiser pulled up behind us. Lights off, but presence unmistakable. Young guy. Couldn't have been more than 25, with a fresh-pressed uniform and that earnest look rookies get when they're trying to appear seasoned. Mr. Garrett? He approached with keys dangling. Magistrate called it in. I'm supposed to let you access the premises, but stay present until you leave. I nodded. Appreciate it, Deputy. Holloway. My dad bought a '72 Chevelle from your father back in '03. Still runs like a dream. Something in my chest loosened a fraction. Dad never let a car leave unless it was right. The deputy smiled slightly. That's what my old man always says. Walt hung back as Holloway unlocked the main entrance. The deadbolt clicked, and he pushed the door open, stepping aside. After you, sir. I paused at the threshold, suddenly hesitant. Last time I'd walked through this door, everything had been normal. Mark and I had locked up together, arguing about whether to close early for Christmas Eve. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The lights flickered on, and that smell hit me. Burned rubber, metal polish, leather conditioner, and the faint ghost of Dad's old spice that somehow never left the place. It was the scent of my childhood, my life's work, my legacy. It smelled like home. Jesus, Walt muttered behind me. Thought for sure we'd find a mess. He wasn't wrong. I'd half expected ransacked tools, emptied drawers, something to show Mark's spite, but everything looked normal, unnervingly so. Like we'd just closed up shop yesterday for a regular weekend. Check the office, I told Walt. I want to see the bays. I moved through the shop floor, running my hand along familiar workbenches. Nothing seemed disturbed. The toolboxes stood organized, the parts shelves labeled in my handwriting. A 1970 Barracuda we'd been restoring for a doctor in Cincinnati sat under its cover, untouched. Bay 3, Bay 4, each space accounted for. Then I reached the special bay, the one we reserved for our showcase projects. And there it was, hoisted on the hydraulic lift, covered in a thin layer of dust but otherwise perfect. Dad's 1967 Mustang Fastback, Highland Green with the 3990 V8. The car he'd bought as a wreck when I was 10. The one we'd restored together bolt by bolt. The one he'd driven exactly once before his heart gave out. I circled it slowly, checking for damage, but Mark hadn't touched it beyond driving it home Christmas Eve. Maybe he'd known better. Maybe even he had limits to his betrayal. The deputy cleared his throat from the doorway. That the one from last night? Yeah. I ran my hand along the fender. This was my dad's pride and joy. You gonna take it with you? I nodded. If that's all right with you. Court order says the premises and all contents are preserved in your custody. He shrugged. Car's yours to drive. I found the control panel and lowered the lift slowly, watching as the Mustang descended like some mechanical deity returning to Earth. The hydraulics hissed and settled with a familiar clunk. Walt appeared from the office, holding a stack of folders. Financial records are intact. Either he didn't have time to doctor them, or he figured digital theft was enough. We got lucky, I said, opening the Mustang's door. The leather driver's seat creaked in welcome. Luck had nothing to do with it, Walt countered. Your niece had everything to do with it. The keys hung from the ignition, Mark's final arrogance. He'd been so certain of his victory, he hadn't bothered hiding them. I slid into the seat, feeling the contours that still held the impression of Dad's larger frame. The steering wheel was cool under my palms. When I turned the key, the engine caught immediately, rumbling to life with that distinctive muscle car growl that vibrated through the concrete floor. I let it idle, listening for any irregularities, but it purred perfectly. Fluids, I muttered, popping the hood. Mark had driven it in winter conditions, and I wasn't taking chances. Oil level good, coolant full, transmission fluid clear, battery connections tight. I methodically checked each system, aware of Walt and the deputy watching silently. She sounds healthy, Walt finally said. She is. I closed the hood with reverence. Dad wouldn't have it any other way. I eased the Mustang down from the lift platform and toward the bay door. The deputy hit the opener, and cold winter air rushed in as the metal door rumbled upward. Outside, snow had started falling again, delicate flakes dancing in the gray afternoon light. You sure you want to take it out in this? Walt gestured at the weather. I nodded. She needs to go home. But as I prepared to pull onto the street, caution tapped my shoulder. Mark was in custody, but his wife wasn't. Amy was still out there, and who knew what other allies might be watching, reporting back, looking for angles to exploit. This stays between us for now, I told Walt and the deputy. No social media, no telling anyone the Mustang's back with me until every legal knot is tied tight. Walt raised an eyebrow. For premature celebration? Invites scrutiny. I adjusted the rearview mirror, catching my own reflection. Eyes tired but alert, jaw set with determination. We play this smart all the way to the finish line. The deputy nodded. Far as I'm concerned, I'm just supervising a court-ordered inventory. I put the car in gear, feeling the transmission engage with solid precision. The Mustang rolled forward onto the snow-dusted street, tires cutting fresh tracks in the gathering white. Through the windshield, I watched snowflakes melt on contact with the warm hood. I woke before my alarm, staring at the ceiling of my apartment while darkness still gripped the world outside. Sleep had come in broken fragments, my mind too wired with everything that had happened. The victory felt real, but fragile, like a freshly welded joint that hadn't fully cooled. 4:30 in the morning, and I was already dressed and downing black coffee. The paperwork Walt had prepared sat in a manila folder on my kitchen counter, the final documents that would legally cement my ownership and control of heritage rides. Just needed signatures at sunrise. Something about notary availability and Walt's insistence on symbolic timing. I grabbed my keys and the folder, then hesitated at the door. On impulse, I went back and took Dad's old shop jacket from the hook, faded blue canvas with the Heritage Rides logo patched on the breast pocket. It still smelled faintly of him, motor oil and that pine-scented soap he'd used. The Mustang waited in the parking lot, a dark silhouette under the security light. I'd parked it in the spot farthest from the street, tucked behind my pickup where curious eyes wouldn't immediately spot it. Mark might be in custody, but I wasn't taking chances with anyone who might still be loyal to him. I fired up the engine, letting it warm properly in the cold. Dad's voice echoed in my head. "Cold engines need respect, son. Give 'em time to wake up before you ask 'em to work." The familiar rumble vibrated through the seat, up my spine, settling something inside me that had been rattled loose. 20 minutes later, I pulled up in front of Mark's house. The windows were dark except for a single light in the kitchen. I texted rather than ring the doorbell. "I'm outside, bringing Lily as we discussed." Mark's wife appeared at the door almost immediately, wrapped in a bathrobe, her face haggard from what I guessed was a sleepless night. She'd called late yesterday, her voice cracking with what sounded like genuine remorse, asking if I could take Lily for a few hours while she dealt with Mark's arrest fallout. "She's ready," she said flatly, holding the door open. "Been up for an hour asking when you'd come." I stepped inside, keeping my distance. "I appreciate this." "Don't." Her voice hardened. "I'm not doing you any favors." She wouldn't stop crying until I agreed to call you. Before I could respond, Lily came bounding down the stairs, her strawberry blonde curls bouncing with each step, already dressed in jeans and her favorite dinosaur sweater. "Uncle Ethan!" She launched herself at me, and I caught her in a hug that squeezed the air from my lungs. "You brought Grandpa's car." "Sure did, kiddo." I set her down and looked her in the eyes. "How'd you know?" She grinned. "I heard it. Nobody's car sounds like that one." Her mother handed me a small backpack. "Her tablet's in there, and a snack." The unspoken message hung between us, the tablet that had saved everything. I nodded my thanks, not trusting myself to speak further. Lily took my hand, practically dragging me toward the door. "I'll have her back by noon," I told her mother. "Fine." She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Just take care of her." Outside, Lily squealed when she saw the Mustang up close. "Can I sit in the front?" "Got your booster seat right here." I pulled it from my truck and secured it in the Mustang's passenger seat, checking the straps twice before helping her climb in. Her small fingers immediately went to the dashboard, tracing the vintage gauges. "Remember when Grandpa let me pretend to drive this?" she asked as I buckled her in. "I do." I smiled, recalling how Dad had sat her on his lap behind the wheel when she was barely 4. "You nearly gave your daddy a heart attack revving the engine." Her face clouded briefly at the mention of Mark, but she quickly brightened. "Where are we going?" "To watch the sunrise at the river." I closed her door and walked around to the driver's side. "And meet Walt for some grown-up business." As we pulled away, I caught a glimpse of her mother watching from the window, a silhouette backlit by the kitchen light. Whatever she'd known about Mark's plans, whatever part she'd played, Lily was innocent. And maybe, just maybe, she'd given her mother a wake-up call too. We drove through empty streets, the Mustang's headlights cutting through lingering darkness. In the rearview mirror, I spotted Walt following in his cruiser, keeping a respectful distance back. He'd insisted on bringing a patrol officer friend to witness the final signatures, making everything official and airtight. "Uncle Ethan, can I turn on the radio?" Lily asked, her breath fogging the side window. "Sure thing, squirt." She fiddled with the knobs of the restored vintage radio until she found a station playing Christmas music. Jingle bells filled the car, and she immediately started humming along, occasionally singing a line or two when she remembered the words. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten as we took the winding road up toward River Point Overlook. The Mustang's rebuilt V8 rumbled confidently as we climbed, eating up the incline like it was nothing. Dad had rebuilt that engine twice, teaching me the second time, both of us covered in grease and cursing stuck bolts. "It sounds like a heartbeat," Lily said suddenly, pausing her humming. I glanced over. "What does?" "The car." She placed her small hand on the dashboard. "Like it was sleeping and now it's awake again." Out of the mouths of babes. That's exactly what it felt like. A heartbeat recovered from a coma. We crested the hill just as the horizon began to blush pink and gold. I pulled into the Overlook's empty parking area and cut the engine. Walt's cruiser pulled in beside us, but he stayed inside, giving us a moment. Lily pressed her face to the window. "The sky's waking up." "Sure is." I rested my hands on the steering wheel, feeling the weight of the moment. The paperwork sat in the folder between us, still unsigned. One final step to close this chapter. I downshifted, letting the Mustang idle at the Overlook's edge. Below us, the river snaked through the valley, its surface catching the first hints of dawn. We waited in comfortable silence for the sun to crown the water. First light broke over the horizon, a brilliant orange gold that set the frozen river ablaze. The water looked like it was on fire, ice crystals reflecting sunbeams in 1,000 different directions. I watched that light catch in the Mustang's side mirror, polished to perfection just like Dad always insisted. "Chrome tells the truth about your work," he used to say. "If it's spotty, so's your craftsmanship." My phone buzzed in my pocket. Walt gave me a nod from his cruiser, holding up his own phone. I pulled mine out and saw a string of news alerts. Local businessman Mark Garrett denied bail in fraud case. Heritage rides. Co-owner faces multiple charges after attempted arson plot. Sponsors drop ties with disgraced car restorer as bankruptcy filing expected. I showed Lily the headlines without comment. She couldn't understand all the words, but she knew what they meant. "Is Daddy going to jail?" she asked, her voice small but steady. "For a little while," I said, not sugarcoating it. "He made some bad choices." She nodded, processing this with that strange wisdom kids sometimes have. "But you fixed it." "We fixed it," I corrected her. "You were the brave one." Walt tapped on his window and held up the clipboard with the final preservation form. Time to make it official. I turned to Lily. "Want to come watch me sign some important papers?" She unbuckled herself faster than I'd ever seen. "Can I help?" "You bet. You can be our witness." The morning air bit at my face as we stepped out of the Mustang. Frost crunched under our boots as we walked over to Walt's cruiser. His buddy, Officer Ramirez, stood beside him in full uniform, looking official despite the early hour. "Morning, Miss Lily," Walt said with a wink. "Ready to help your uncle with some important business?" She nodded solemnly. Suddenly, all business. Walt spread the papers on his hood. "This is the final preservation order and ownership confirmation. Once you sign this, the bank transfers are officially frozen and reversed. Heritage Ride stays in your name, just like your dad intended." I stared at the dotted line, feeling the weight of the moment. "And Mark?" "His accounts are already frozen. Between the criminal charges and what's about to hit the fan with his gambling buddies, he's looking at legal shackles and reputation ruin." Walt handed me a pen. Perfect storm of justice, if you ask me. I took the pen, its metal cold against my fingers. One signature to close this chapter. One line of ink to restore what was nearly stolen. I signed my name with a steady hand, the same way I'd sign off on a completed restoration. "Lily, you want to put your name here as witness?" I asked, pointing to a blank space beside mine. Her eyes went wide. "Really? Really? This is your victory too?" She took the pen, gripping it with determination, and carefully wrote her name in big, uneven letters. Walt and Officer Ramirez both signed as official witnesses. "Now, for the official part," Ramirez said, pulling out a notary stamp from his breast pocket. The stamp came down with a satisfying thunk, leaving the county seal impressed in the paper. "That's it," Walt said, gathering the papers. It's done. Heritage Rides is officially and legally yours again. Mark can't touch it. Not now. Not ever. Lily let out a giggle that echoed in the crisp morning air, a sound as bright and clear as the chrome glinting in the sunrise. She did a little victory dance that made even the serious-faced Officer Ramirez crack a smile. Walt clapped me on the shoulder. I'll file these first thing when the office opens. You two go enjoy Christmas morning. He offered a mock salute before climbing back into his cruiser. Officer Ramirez nodded respectfully and joined him. They pulled away, tires crunching on the frosted gravel. I stood there with Lily, watching the sun climb higher over the river valley. Steam rose from the Mustang's exhaust in delicate plumes that caught the light, turning ordinary vapor into feathers of gold. Dad would have loved this view, this moment. Can we go for a drive now? Lily asked, tugging at my hand. A real one. You bet we can. We walked back to the Mustang, its red paint gleaming in the morning light. I helped Lily back into her booster seat before sliding behind the wheel. My hands wrapped around the leather, feeling the worn spots where Dad's hands had gripped it thousands of times before. The engine rumbled to life, its vibration traveling up through the steering column and into my chest. It felt like Dad's legacy thrumming renewed, like the heartbeat Lily had described earlier. All those hours spent in the shop together, all his lessons about doing things right, about honor and craftsmanship, they hadn't been in vain. I looked at Lily, her face bright with excitement, then back at the road ahead, stretching clear and open before us. Honor cashes every debt, I murmured, putting the car in gear.